Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all excellent. I started out setting up this rack thinking I was going to do another preamp comparison video. And then I thought about two things. One, I've already done that several times. And two, no matter what you do with these kind of things, there is always going to be an army of people saying, A, why didn't you have this preamp or my favorite preamp? And B, how did you run it? I wouldn't have run it like that. People didn't run it like that back in the day. You should have done all these different things. So as, I guess, insurance against that, what I'm going to do is just show you 5 of my favorite preamps, and I'm going to dial in sounds that I like out of each of them. I don't want to try to make these all sound the same. I think they each have their unique strengths and weaknesses, whether it's the user interface or whether it's just the tones. I'll talk about that user interface in a second, but that's the whole point of this video. Furthermore, I don't have a switching system or anything like that, so I'm just going to hard patch all of this, and then you will have to put up with a bunch of quick cuts in this video, but that's cool. So what I'm doing is, in my cab room, I have my Marshall with greenbacks. It's a Marshall TV cab, 25 watt greenbacks. I figured that would probably be the speaker that is the most agreeable both to my own ears and everybody else. I don't want to set up a bunch of different cabs for all of this. And then I have my Marshall DSL 50 as the power section. So I do have a Mesa Stereo 250 in here, but I like EL34s a little bit more for this kind of stuff. So keep in mind that when you hear all of this, you are hearing it through the filter of the Marshall power section. I wish I had a VHT 250. I wish I had a Mesa 290 as well, but I don't. So I'm just going to roll with the DSL because I've used that a whole bunch when using preamps. And like I said, even though I own a rack power amp, I just kind of prefer the way the Marshall with the EL34s sounds like. Puts me in my happy place when I dial in tones. So keep in mind you are hearing all of this through greenbacks and a Marshall power section and a Shure SM57, which is placed not just on the dust cap, it's actually a little bit further to the right. It's a slightly darker position. It's not just a 57 on the cone. So that's my least favorite miking position ever, but I figured I would go for something slightly stock with all of that. All right. Then we get to hear the preamps. So I'm going to plug this guitar in, my PRS Custom 24, and we're going to go. We're going to start with the big 3, the MP1, the JMP-1, and the Triaxis. These are the MIDI programmable preamps that I own, and I would say when people think about rack mount preamps, one of these 3 is going to jump into their mind immediately. There's a whole bunch of other great rack mount preamps that I just don't own or I don't have access to, but for my taste, these 3 are the 3 that I go to. So what we'll hear is a basic clean and crunch sound out of each of them, and I really just want to highlight what each one does best because they do different things. We'll start with the MP1, and we're going to start with the solid state clean. For me, this is one of the very unique things about this particular preamp. It essentially nails a Roland JC120 sound. If you've looked at any rig rundowns from the mid-80s, it seems like every guitar player had a modified Marshall for their crunch tone and a JC120 for their crystalline clean tone, you know, worrying about things like stacking low-gain overdrive pedals into a cleanish amp to get an edge of breakup tone was not a thing. It was like the 2 extremes of guitar tone. So we'll start with this solid state clean. I'm on one of the split modes on my Custom 24, then I'll add a little bit of chorus. What's really cool about this is there is a compressor in the circuit that you can adjust with the OD1 parameter. Let's hear it. Alrighty, really sparkly. I'm going to hit the edit button and I'll go in here and I'm going to crank this compressor even further. There's a little bit of kind of like clock noise from somewhere. That's a kind of weird thing. I'll also add a little bit of chorus. That's actually a ridiculously cool clean sound. I think the chorus in this is one of my favorite overall choruses ever. And I'm talking about my favorite chorus being the Roland and Boss CE1. This is probably second or third, somewhere in there. It's a fantastic sounding subtle chorus when you want it to be. You can also crank it up and kind of get vibey style sounds. All right, what we're going to do is really fancily hard patch this. I'm going to go to input 1 of my JMP-1. There'll be a quick cut because I have to connect some things at the back, and then we'll hear the JMP-1 on clean 2. So there are 2 clean modes on the JMP-1. We're going to start with clean 2 because that's my favorite one. I've kind of just got it set up for, you know, a pretty vanilla sort of clean sound. There's a bass shift parameter on this preamp, which basically, I don't know what it does. It shifts the bass. It just kind of gives you a subtle low-end lift. It's probably just like a shelving filter or something like that. But this is what it sounds like without and then with. It actually sounds a whole lot like the clean channel on my Marshall DSL, which I really like. I've recorded with that amp a whole bunch, and this is a pretty kind of usable platform if you wanted to stack some stuff into it. All right, another little quick cut coming because now I need to patch in the Triaxis. So this is the rhythm green mode on the Triaxis. It's basically the crystalline clean mode, and out of these 3 cleans, I know the ADA kind of has that cool new wavy character with a bit of chorus and compression, but for just a straight up tubey kind of clean, Triaxis all day for me. Check it out. Out of all of these, this is the one that kind of reminds me the most of an amp head. If you haven't seen my comparison between the Triaxis and a Mesa Mark IV, I actually kind of prefer the Triaxis cleans to the Mark IV cleans for this sort of thing. It's just a nice, fat, punchy clean, feels great under your fingers, and it would probably be the one that I choose out of all of these, as I said earlier. So let's now start with the Triaxis. I'll give you a crunch sound, and this thing does the Mark II C+ or the Mark IV thing, you know, close enough. I'm sure people who own a Mark II C+ or a Mark IV, when you hear them side by side, their opinion is probably going to differ, but I've put this side by side with a Mark IV, and I've been able to get it pretty close. I still prefer the Mark IV, but it's, you know, within spitting distance. So let's hear the lead 2 yellow mode on the Triaxis. It's just a beautiful thing. It is crazy, crazy easy to play. It's so saturated, yet it's so articulate. I wish it had a graphic EQ. I've talked about this before, but the dynamic voice kind of gets you close enough. When you really crank that dynamic voice, you can get it super, super duper scooped. Or if you back it up, you can really get that Mark Series liquid lead thing on the neck pickup. All right, let's go in reverse now. Let's hear what the JMP-1 does best, in my opinion. So for me, the JMP-1 is the closest out of these 3 preamps to sounding like an actual Marshall head. Feels pretty good under your fingers when you're playing on the OD1 mode. I much prefer OD1 to OD2. OD2 is just a little bit kind of like sizzly and oversaturated for me, but if I just want to do the Marshall crunch thing, the JMP-1 is going to do it. cool. Again, it definitely kind of sounds like the Marshall DSL. I've actually shot those out before, and I could basically get all the sounds I get from this on the DSL. So that is what the JMP-1 does for kind of crunch sounds. If you hear OD2, like I said, it's just a little bit much. It doesn't have the articulation that the Triaxis does, or the overall kind of, I guess, character. The Triaxis is just great for that like insane amount of articulate high gain, whereas this kind of falls apart on OD2. It's not terrible by any means, but yeah, I like it for more of the kind of classic Marshall style crunch. And then if I want hair metal tones, well, we're going to hear the 88 MP1 right now. It's more towards the Triaxis kind of thing than the JMP-1. The Triaxis just, again, if you want to do thrash, like, and you want to do dream theater, and you want to do Mesa tones, just get a Triaxis. It's my favorite preamp out of these three, but nothing really does what that 88 MP1 does for that kind of hair metal tone, you know? If you want to do that era of tones, you want to do White Lion, you want to do the first Skid Row album, get one of these. It will keep you pretty happy if you pair it with the right power amp. The added bonus is you have a kind of great compressed chorusy new wave tone in there as well if you want it. So that's the big three. Let's hear the preamps with knobs. We're going to start with, in my opinion, one of the most underrated preamps ever, the Peavey Rockmaster. So the Rockmaster has an insane amount of outputs. It's like every channel has an effects loop. There's multiple outputs. There's a master effects loop. There is an active EQ section for the crunch and the lead channels. The clean channel has its own thing going on. I don't have the foot switch for it available at the moment. I haven't been able to find it, so I can't get the clean and the crunch mode. So we'll just kind of live on the ultra mode. And this sounds pretty good. If I go onto the split modes on this, I can definitely get a nice sweet edge of breakup sound with the active EQ all in the middle. If I add a little bit more gain, this also has a pull gain and a pull mid-range control. This is pretty wicked. You can kind of do those bluesy edge of breakup tones with the Rockmaster, which, you know, the Triaxis can kind of get there, but it's got a different character going on. The MP1, not really. And again, the JMP1, not really. It just is a little bit stiff or something. But this is really cool. And then if you want to go into a bridge humbucker, you want to pull that gain control out, pull the mid-range control out, boost a bit of bottom, boost a bit of what they call edge. And this is a pretty ridiculous, almost 5150-ish kind of tone without having to use a boost. So it's definitely the closest thing you can get to like a modern high gain sound that isn't a Mark series style thing like the Triaxis or the Mesa Studio. This is one of those preamps where I'm not always in the mood for it, but when I am, it just scratches the itch in a massive way. It can do bluesy and it can do that thing. You know, it's kind of like a poor man's 5150, or if you want a 5150 for your existing rack system, that can also do some really nice edge of breakup tones. This thing kind of covers that ground that the other preamps just don't cover. Like the Triaxis does the sweet, fat, Fendery cleans and the Mark series thing. The MP1 does the like the kind of new wave and the hair metal stuff. The JMP-1 does, you know, the JCM 800 and JTM 45 thing. But the Rockmaster sits in the middle. You can do modern high gain with it. You can get some kind of nice bluesy stuff out of it. The last one to hear is the big boy, the Mesa Studio Pre. All right, I talked about how the Rockmaster was like a poor man's 5150. No offense to anyone who loves their Rockmaster and doesn't dig 5150s, but the Studio Preamp is definitely a poor man's Mark II C+. And that is no diss on it at all because it sounds amazing. It's just not as insanely expensive used as the 2C pluses because, you know, the association with Metallica, the association with John Petrucci and Dream Theater. I'm convinced that John probably owns like half of the 2C pluses ever made by now. But if you want that thing that it does, get a Studio Preamp because this thing can do the really sweet, fat, punchy cleans. I know I said I really like the Triaxis for that kind of thing, but the fact that this has knobs and the graphic EQ, it is just a little bit more like playing an actual Mark series amp head. And this makes a really sweet kind of pedal platform if you do want to put pedals in front of it, but let's just hear that delicious, delicious clean sound. Now, if I really kind of push the volume control on this and swap to a bridge humbucker, we get this. It's got that kind of honky thing going on, which I really, really like. I actually kind of like that crunchy thing a little bit more than the good old JMP-1. You know, if you kind of boost the mids a little bit more, you put the bright switch on, you get this. It's really cool for like a lower gain Marshall style thing, but you know, the reason most people want a 2C plus or a Studio Preamp it really just kind of picks up where the Triaxis started when it comes to tight and articulate. The low end isn't as extended as something like the Rockmaster or even the Triaxis, but it's just, you can't get that level of tightness, I find, out of the Triaxis, and the fact that you've got the graphic EQ and not a dynamic voice control just makes it so much more flexible. You can really kind of tune this to what you like. And you probably heard there that, yeah, you know, there wasn't as much low end, but I like that because, you know, if you're putting guitars into a mix with drums and bass, you can get away with a little less of that. There's also a fat switch on here, which if you turn the lead 2 drive all the way up and the volume 1 all the way up and play on the neck pickup, it's beautiful. Massively distorted, it's smooth, yet it's aggressive and it's clear. It really sits in that kind of Goldilocks zone. There's 5 of my favorite preamps. I didn't do a bunch of side-by-side stuff, but that's why you're gonna hear a clean sound and a crunch sound from each of them at the end. They are all gonna sound different, but that's why I have these things. Let me know, what are your favorite rack preamps out of these and out of the whole kind of little ecosystem of rack preamps. I'm going to make a call right here before I play you guys these clips. I've seen a lot of things on a couple of big YouTube channels talking about rack stuff, and I think the rack is back in 2021, or at least maybe the nostalgia for it. So before you go and buy something, hopefully this actually provides you a good reference point for what you might like. I know you might have seen some things where you go, hey, the JMP-1 is awesome, but it might actually turn out that you want the Rockmaster kind of sound, or you might really want a JMP-1 because Iron Maiden and Def Leppard use them, but maybe the tones you're actually chasing would come out of something like a studio preamp or a Triaxis. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will just give you some clips at the end of this video. They'll be as close as I can get to all of them being the same volume, but again, they're all gonna sound different. These are just my favorite clean and crunch sounds out of the units that I have. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. If you like what you see and you want to support the channel, in the video description there are links to the Ragdoll Bandcamp page. You can purchase our discography and get merch like these glow-in-the-dark t-shirts. Furthermore, there is a link in the video description to my Patreon if you want to become a patron and support the channel directly. As always, thank you so much for watching.